So this presentation, I promise you, won't be too long on my end where I'm doing all the talking. I will obviously have a lot of talking to do. At the end, I will give you guys all the opportunity in the world to ask questions. I know you probably have a lot. I'll first start, before we even get into this, by saying I believe in this. There was a lot of time put into this. There's still going to be a lot of time put into this. This is not a finished product. This is far from a finished product. But as not only a principal, an educator, but more importantly as a parent of kids that live in this district, that go to this school, that will continue to go to Northern Lebanon, I am excited about this, probably more so as a parent. Standards-based report cards and the process and the mindset and the shift was new to me last year when we started diving into this, and I'll talk about the process in a little bit, the timeline. It was new to me. I learned a lot through my own research, but probably more importantly, talking to other districts that have established it and have been effective in delivering it to their community. Talking to my teachers, we had a lot of teachers involved in this process, and they put a lot of time into this, so they get a lot of credit. But again, it was a learning experience, and I view this overall process as a learning experience, something that's going to continue to be really good and get better every year. So that's kind of my disclaimer for it all. But we'll kind of start here, if you don't mind, Mrs. Herman.
Hey, John, did you say you needed that on?
Did you get it? Did you hit that? Let's see, thank you. That's my fault. I threw you off, Mrs. Herman, because of the phone. I'm not going to say all that again. That was kind of my intro, so we're good there. So we will start with the presentation. First off, I'd like to start here. Let's have a basic conversation on what standards are. I know probably most of you are familiar with it, but just so we're all on the same page, I give you some very clear-cut terminology that was shared with the teachers, that teachers are pretty familiar with, terminology that was shared with the board members last year when we presented. So we'll start with standards are, set of learning goals for each grade level and subject. You're going to see a sample report card in a few minutes, and all of this will be laid out, I think, a little more clearer. Learning goals identify content and skills students should be achieving by the end of the school year. The opportunity that we will present is really neat. It's really cool in the sense that we're now going to explain more of what's going on in the school, more of what's going on every day, more of what the state expects us to teach on a daily basis when you entrust your children into our classrooms. As anything, as kids increase in grade level and they mature and the years go on, standards are going to increase in complexity when they move from one grade level to another. That's no surprise there. A lot of the terminology, as you're going to see through this process, is very similar. The PDE uses similar language between the grade levels. In ELA especially. ELA is very, very similar. But even though that language is similar, we know that the rigor and the bar is going to be set higher as we go to the next grade level, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, I think the most important piece of this as a parent, as a teacher, it's to make sure we're communicating what we're doing and how can we help kids get better in really simple terms. The report card provides parents with specific information about their child's achievement relative to what the state expects. So that's a very basic overview, okay? Go ahead, Torio. Why transition to standards-based report cards? Why don't we just keep doing the same thing? Well, it's not up there, but I would say staying status quo isn't always a good thing. I've been in this district 4 years. I've worked in districts in Schuylkill County that have not made transitions. Obviously, we're in this process of this transition, but at the same time, I think all of us, we see what goes on around us, right? I always hear, as a staff member, I know the teachers here too, well, Palmyra does this, Annville-Cleona does this, Lower Dauphin does this. And I think those are good things. I think it's good to see what everybody else around us is doing. And it goes back to, again, do we want to be status quo? Do we want to get the same results year in, year out? And I would argue no. And I would hope everyone feels that way in terms of we want to get better in every year, everything we do. So on paper, for everyone to see, this is kind of why. This is why it was proposed from district administration. This is why it was proposed to our board members. This is why it's been proposed to the teachers who initially had to buy in, because without teacher buy-in, that committee work isn't going to be as strong as you would hope. I'll start at the top left and kind of go left to right. Research-based growth mindset. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide, something that our staff just went through a 2-day training in, and how it connects to this. Again, I mentioned it's aligned to PA Common Core standards. We're for multiple reasons, we're now communicating better on what the state expects and what teachers have to teach. Letter grades alone do not tell parents which skills their child is mastered in. That's one I always go back to. And I never thought about it up until I started getting into this process. And when you talk to the experts, or you hear people, or you watch videos, or whatever your content is, you hear, well, what does an 85 in math mean? What does a 76 in English mean? When I ask that question, I don't know the answer. And probably in the past, I would just kind of brush that off and be like, well, you had all these assessments, you calculated the average, it came out to a 79, and that's a C plus maybe. Well, what does that mean? And we'll get back to that. Bottom left, provides parents with specific information about the achievement relative to state standards. Again, that's a big piece of this. We want to communicate to parents. If this is really good for teachers and really good for administration, and it's really not good for parents, we probably wouldn't be presenting this. I wouldn't stand up here and present this. I would have tried to get out of this as quick as I could. It ensures consistency across classrooms and schools. That's an important piece here, more in the infrastructure of the school. This encourages all stakeholders in the building to constantly look at those standards. And also, take it a step further, look at the assessments that are aligned to those standards, right? So let's say I'm the principal here at Jonestown. I know most of you, and I didn't kind of start there with the introduction, but I am the principal here at Jonestown. But if I have a kiddo that goes to Lickdale in first grade, and let's say the assessments weren't the same, which again, they are. We use the same reading programs, we use the same math programs, but again, it could happen. There could be a teacher here in first grade that assesses a little more or a little less than maybe a teacher at Lickdale. And I think that goes on everywhere. We're humans, and in this setting, we operate in 4 different buildings, right? So you're going to have inconsistency no matter how consistent you try to get. This gets at that. This gets at that because our teachers across grade levels, across the district, have to have conversations, and they know that. And I hear them say it, and I see them say it. Just again, we spent a couple days this week meeting with the IU, meeting with a consultant from the IU, and getting everybody in a room, the Lickdales, the Fredericksburgs, the Jonestowns, East Hanovers, getting those teachers together was a really cool thing because they're having those conversations, and they know these conversations have to occur and continue and occur. And again, it leads to this. It leads to us as a district to critically examine the standards, the materials, the methods, and ultimately how are we assessing kids and communicating that. So this is kind of the big idea behind it. This is why. There's got to be a reason why we're doing this. Why are we throwing this at people? We feel it's research-based. We know it's research-based. And based off of this, it sounds really good. But let's get into why a little more specifically. Growth and fixed mindset. I have some teachers here. They saw this the other day. The IU presented this. I sat through that training with the teachers, and I saw this last year at a different training in Hershey at the PA Principal Conference. And this is a big thing. I don't know how many parents are familiar with this, but if you really want to read up on some interesting stuff, outside of, nothing to do with school, just about your kid, about how we learn. This is amazing stuff. It goes back to a researcher by the name of Carol Dweck. I think it's D-W-E-C-K, don't quote me on that, but Carol Dweck, who did research over like a 30-year span, and she talked about, kind of laid this out. You have this fixed mindset that is probably historic and outdated, and hopefully you can see some of that stuff. I won't read every single one, but these are kind of maybe what's going on in the mind, in the perception of Dweck of a child with a fixed mindset. And don't think just school here. Think sports. Think just maturing at home, socialization, because I think that ties into the whole child. And then you have growth mindset. And if you read some of these quotes, it's totally different. It's totally different. I'm going to give you kind of a layman's term example, because I'm a layman's term person. I like to keep things simple. In a fixed mindset, I'm going to go back to the grades. I'm going to tie it in the grades. In 4th grade, I wasn't very good at math. So in 4th grade, let's say, and I probably had lower than this, but I had a 75 in math. I ended the year with an overall grade of a 75, and I felt I tried hard, I did all my homework, I was organized, my parents helped me, and this is a true story. I had a tutor, my mom, I remember, paid for a tutor. No matter what, I was always going to be a C student in math. And that was my mindset. I felt like no matter what I could do, no matter how hard I tried, no matter what opportunities were there, I was always going to be a C student, and that carried with me. And in middle school, high school, I just didn't like math. And that's not necessarily a knock on my teachers. It was more that fixed mindset. It was what I was used to, I was accustomed to it, and it was always going to happen no matter what, no matter how great my teachers were or how bad my teachers were. So think about that. I'm sure we can all think of an example where we just, no matter what, we're always going to be this. I'll use a sports example. I coached basketball for a long time before I crossed into administration. And I thought about this during our IU training for some of the teachers that are sitting here. If I had a kid that went into the gym and they wanted to become a better free throw shooter, and I've had student athletes say, Coach, I shot 50 foul shots, I'm not getting any better. My foul shooting percentage is still poor. Or I'm working on my ball handling all year, it's not getting any better. That's a mentality. That's as a coach you would say a poor attitude, but in reality that's a fixed mindset, right? No matter what they do, they're not going to get better, or at least they're throwing obstacles in front of themselves. Now take that to a growth mindset. Growth mindset says, sky's the limit, but there's ways we have to get there. And what Dweck says is, a lot of it's through praise and feedback. So think about feedback, because that's what kind of drives my brain with this. Standards-based report cards is all about feedback. You're going to see that shortly. So tie growth mindset into what standards-based reporting looks like. We're getting at some of this, I'm always going to be that C student, or I'm never going to be a great reader. Now it's through, and again, it's not only a teacher or a student mindset, it's also a teacher mindset. And it's something as a school we got to continue to focus in on. And we are and we will. But through encouragement and not intellectual praise. Not that, good job, guys, that's great. You did really good on that quiz. It's more that effort praise, right? It's that, hey, you worked really hard yesterday. Let's continue to push it a little further. Let's continue to work a little harder on your division skills. And here's some practice that we're going to do. So now we're focusing on the specifics of what makes that kid better in whatever area that is. And we're encouraging through praise and feedback. That is the key, feedback. I could keep talking about this. There's so much to it. I encourage you to look it up. I really encourage you to just, if you Google growth mindset, it comes up, and Dweck's name comes up. Really good research on this, and it ties into what we're getting at. So I'm going to talk a little more about logistics, about the process of this. And again, my goal is to make sure this is out there and everyone sees this. This is very transparent. There were no secrets in this. There was no secret meetings like, hey, let's throw standards-based report cards out at people. This was a very transparent process, and it started last year. It started last fall when, in November, we got grade level reps from every building in the district together here in Jonestown for a day. We provided sub-coverage. We had, so for example, I see Chrissy Boltz out here, first grade teacher. She was one of the first grade reps, and she sat in a room with first grade teachers from all over the district, and they grinded out standards. It doesn't sound very exciting. I don't know if it was or not. Very exciting. But what they had to do was unpack standards, right? Unpack the standards, not necessarily all of the standards that the state expects us to teach, right? I should say not every standard you would see on the SAS website that PDE provides, but the standards that we know we're hitting through the assessments that we currently have. And a lot of you may know, last year we adopted a new reading series. In K-2 we have Super Kids, which we're thrilled about. In grades 3 to 5, we have Wonders, which we're thrilled about in a different way because the rigor has stepped up. And any third grade parents, especially when you go second to third grade, you see that transition, it gets harder, plain and simple. In 4th grade and 5th grade. So we wanted a new program that stepped its game up, and I think it's doing that. But overall, those are things that we have to take in consideration. We just can't say we're teaching all these standards and we're going to assess them all these different ways, but we don't have the assessment tools. And that's something through this process we have to continually look at as a district through a curriculum process and all that. So that's kind of how it started. And then in February, we brought grade level teams back, but That time, we chunked them. We took some of the first grade teachers, some of the second grade, I think it was 2. We took 2 first, 2 second, 2 third. I'm sorry, 2K, 2 1, 2 2. That was our primary group. We put them in a room for a day. Now they started not only unpacking the standards, but reviewing the standards. They started finding consistencies from K to 1, 1 to 2, and that was our primary group. Same thing with 3, 4, and 5. They came in, they grinded out all day, and they tried to find consistency. And you're going to see how they're different in terms of primary versus intermediate, but they're very similar when you look at those two categories. In March, again, more logistically, we had to start shooting this information. February, March, we had our reading specialists and special ed. And I'll talk about special ed too at the end of this. We had those people look at it because they're very important, obviously. Our reading specialists and our special ed have to have a say and have to be familiar with the process. March, more logistically, we had to figure out what it's going to look like. We have Power School here at Northern Lebanon School District. Power School drives drives our grading in terms of the housekeeping, what it looks like, how it comes out. With the exception of kindergarten, every report card in the past has been pumped through Power School as long as we've had it, and that's before my time. So we had to make sure this fit. And if it didn't fit, it would have led to a bigger conversation on, well, we want standards-based report cards. How the heck are we going to make it fit with the system that we have? Luckily, Power School, and they're based out of the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit, luckily they've worked with numerous districts, as local as Palmyra, I believe, to districts out in the Lehigh Valley, Parkland, Northampton. So a lot of districts that they kind of shared with me, hey, you're in the same boat. We had districts like these that have transitioned from traditional to standards-based. And obviously there's been ongoing collaboration. I talk to the lady from the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate at least once a week, sometimes more than once a week, sometimes every day. She's coming in here October 8th to work with our teachers on what the Power School piece looks like as we get ready to roll out the first report card. That's logistic stuff. Through all that, and I don't have that here, there was a presentation to the board members on 2 occasions. One was with board members prior to a board meeting, and then one was in the public board meeting setting. So the second presentation wasn't detailed with the PowerPoint. The first one was. The second one was more of a kind of an overview because we tied in the 5-day cycle and the trimesters into that. So that's the process. What does grading look like right now in 2018-19? So this is probably what you want to know the most. Grading assessments has not changed this year. It has not changed. For example, in second grade, my oldest is in second grade, so I'm thinking of what second grade teacher, some of those assessments I see. Spelling, my kid just had a spelling quiz. It was worth 13 points or 12 points with a bonus question. He got whatever out of 12 points. Okay, that doesn't change. Those scores are still put into Power School the same way. They're still put into the grade book for any parents that are looking at their grade book. You're still seeing those scores, okay, for all subject areas. Okay? Power School will still show parents how their students did on the assignments. Behaviors will be scored on the standards-based report cards. You're going to see that shortly for grades K to 2. And that's historically how it's always, we've always reported out, as far as back as I know, behaviors, okay? 3, 4, 5, I believe, did not, and they're not going to, at least this year. Now, we had conversations with the IU that maybe that's something we should look at going forward, and we will, if that's something that, again, is going to be useful and meaningful for everybody. But, and I know it's hard to envision. You're going to see it shortly. Specials are assessed in the traditional system. So historically, it's always been phys ed, art, music. You have that O for outstanding, that S for satisfactory. We're trying to roll this out in a way that's not too overwhelming, even though it feels overwhelming at times. This was one of those things we just want to kind of stay away from for year 1. All right, year 2, maybe we look at it, and I know we will look at it, and whatever that decision is, we're gonna have those conversations. That was kind of one of those things. Let's just hold off on that. All right, I don't think that's going to ruffle anybody's feathers. Those were the conversations we had, and most importantly, specialist teachers were like, that's a good thing. They're okay with that. The only impact, this is very important, the only impact that this will have on special ed is it's going to provide more information. It falls in the same category as any child. We're giving parents more information with the way we report out. Now, for any people familiar with special ed, you know this. I don't have to say this. The IEP trumps anything we're going to roll out. I mean, that's just the goals in that IEP that are agreed upon by the team, that trumps it. So, listen, I'm not oblivious to what goes on. I go on Facebook. I read, I see the concerns, I see the questions, and it's good. It's good to have this conversation because I want people to understand that is one thing we would never, for many reasons, alter in a negative way. So there will be a comment section and there will be common district language. So for example, if you have a child that is in 4th grade, okay, I think this is an example that came up in one of the trainings yesterday. If you have a child in 4th grade, but they're being assessed primarily at a 2nd grade level, right? How do we show that on the report card? It doesn't accurately show. If we show a number value, which you're going to see shortly, if we're going to show you a number value, but it doesn't accurately pertain to the grade level that child's being assessed on, then that's not really accurate information. So we want to still communicate that, and we just don't want to send blank reports home. Talking to special ed here, the special ed team, nothing changes. The same information that's always been communicated is still being communicated. And now you're just getting a little more. And you'll have that common district language on the report card that will say any of those kind of broad accommodations in terms of assessments, if that makes sense. And if you have questions about that, please ask. I know I want to open this up to you guys, and I want to get through this, but at any time, if you want to cut me off and ask, please do it. So that's what grading looks like, okay? Scoring indicators. This is what you're going to see on the report card. You're not going to see, well, let me back up. Let's start here. These are your 4, 3, 2, 1 scoring indicators, and then you're not assessed. So if you look at the far left, I know it's kind of hard to see, I'll read it. A 4, and we took this language from conversations with other districts and what people have done successfully, we thought, and obviously teachers had a say. I mean, we wanted people to feel comfortable, and at the end of the day, the IU thought, well, you could call it advanced, you could call it proficient, align it with PSSAs. But sometimes, parents in K1 and 2, they might not necessarily, that might be a little more confusing. That might be a lot of information. And what we found was districts that were happy with the way they communicated it. It was a consensus that the 4-3-2-1 was a good system. So we stole that. We stole that. A 4 is exceeding the grade level standard. The student exceeds the proficiency of those essential skills and concepts. The example I gave the teachers, and I'll give to you guys because I think it helps my brain process this. Picture you're teaching your kid how to ride a bike. Okay, my just turned 5-year-old is still using those training wheels, and we're trying to get those training wheels off, and he's scared. He doesn't want to do it. But I think about him, and I think about this example. We've all have heard of a situation, or maybe we've had a child. Like my oldest child is like this, where I don't think he ever used training wheels. He was just a little more whatever, for whatever freakish reason. He got on a bike, he could ride a bike with little or no assistance. I think about that, and to me that's a 4. He exceeded what those expectations were at his age level. He got on that bike and he rode it. And he rode it without any assistance or training wheels or any of that stuff. My other son, he loves those training wheels. And that's age appropriate, I think. I mean, he's 5 years old. It's age appropriate. It's not a bad thing. Do we want to still push him to get to that 4, get to that exceeding the expectations? Absolutely. In everything we do. So I go to the 3 there. He's meeting what those expectations are. 3 is really good. Really good. And that's going to be one thing we're going to get to. That's going to be hard for all of us. Because we don't want to live and die by the A, B, C, D, F. We don't want to live and die by that. There's still going to be a little bit of that meshing year 1, but we don't want to live and die by that. I want people to think about that bike analogy. We go to the 2. Again, 2's not bad. 2 is really good. They're progressing toward the standard. The student is developing an understanding of essential skills and concepts, but has not yet met the standard. You're going to see, and it's going to be hard in year 1 for everybody, for teachers, parents, but there's going to be 2s on report cards in a lot of cases. And I think parents that may be used to B's and A's, and they're gonna equate this to a C, and that's, we don't want to do that. But it's human nature. We're going to do it. And I think through time and communication with parents and the way we conference, and again, that starts with admin giving tools to these teachers to communicate effectively at conference time, we need to get over those humps. And that's part of the standards-based transition. That's going to happen in any district, and I've heard this from people I've talked to. No matter where you go, it doesn't matter what district. This is the hardest thing to get over when you go standards-based, because you're getting away from that. Again, I always use this example, not to go on a tangent. When I was a kid, my grandparents, when they were alive, it was always, hey, you got straight A's, you got $10. My grandfather would take me, we go to McDonald's or we go to the movies, like that kind of stuff. It was always that old school, like, and my kid does it now too. I got straight A's, and his uncle gave him like $30 or something like that. Like, it sounds stupid, but it's not, right? It's part of what we're used to. It's part of what a lot of us are accustomed to. It's that traditional, this is what we do. And it goes back to that status quo. Things like that, it's got to look different if we want to change and if we want to improve, in my opinion. I mean, I'm giving you the McDonald's and the money example. Maybe that doesn't pertain to anybody else, but that's the way I know those are little traditional things that affect people. So we go back down to 1. A 1 as a score on a standard would mean intensive progress needed to meet that standard. Okay? Is there concern? Sure. Sure, there's concern. But now, as you're going to see shortly, this is going to help us get at whatever that issue is. So instead of saying, this student over here has a 66 in math, well, what if they were really good at geometry? What if they're but there wasn't enough geometry assessments, right? The algebraic piece or the data analysis, like that, all the other stuff brought them down. So now when we break down these standards and we're showing where, because you may have, and I'm going to give you an example in a second, with fluency versus comprehension. Now you can see what where that standard fits, or where that child fits with the standard. Because maybe they're not really a 66 in math. They just struggled in one area of math, and they're strong here. But now, as a teacher and as a parent, we can hone in on that particular weakness. And that's where the 1 comes in. We're going to use X for not assessed. You're going to have children in any grade level, especially K1 and 2, that are going to have X's in certain standards. And that's not a bad thing. That just means we didn't get to that standard yet. There was no assessment to determine where that child falls in the standard. Okay? We were going to use NA, and that was more of a logistic housekeeping thing. Power School had the X system worked better. I prefer the NA, but I don't know, X seems negative. It's not, and that's going to be communicated. Okay? Those are the indicators. That's a lot. I know. We're going to tie it all in right now. Go ahead. All right. This is very hard to see. I know that. And this is on the website. This is a sample of a second grade report card. I'm not sure why second grade. I think because this was the first grade level team that was done, and that it kicked back multiple times for kind of just housekeeping grammatical things. But this was the first one Power School kicked back to us. So this is the one I wanted to put on the website so people can kind of start putting a visual to it. This is pretty darn close in terms of formatting on what it's going to look like. Okay? This is the first page. There's 2 pages to this. We'll get to the second in a second. In the top left, okay, you have your ELA. ELA right below where the child's name would be, or where the teacher name is. Right below that you see in bold, under a line, English Language Arts. Okay? That's a subject area. And again, this is all on the website. So, I mean, I have the link on here. It's on the district website if you go to Community Standards-Based Report Cards. So you see that left-hand column, all of the standards expected by our teachers, expected from the state to our teachers to get to in a year. This is second grade. It's overwhelming, but it's the reality of it. Okay? Actually, it's just not the left. If you look at the left and then you have writing and handwriting in the middle of it, those are all those standards that we're expected to show proficiency in, that your child is expected to show proficiency in. Looks a lot different than just saying math, you have an 86. okay? For whatever reason, and I think that might, in terms of the order of operation, I believe it's changed. I think math comes after ELA, but again, it's just in terms of what comes first. You see math over here to the far right. Wait till if you have a child in 4th or 5th grade, you should see all the math standards there. And again, it's not because we wanted to fire standards out there, it's because we have to, this is what we have to do, this is what our teachers have to do in a year. Again, it's broken down. You have numbers and operations under math, okay? You have your algebra concepts, you have geometry, you have measurement, data, and probability. So on a report card, and you see the 1, 2, 3, that's our trimester. We went from a 4-marking period reporting time frame to a 3-time trimester. And the reason we did that, and that was sent home in a letter at the end of May or early June, so I hope everybody got that. And that's also on the website. We did that because when we talked to districts and we talked to experts on this, that was kind of the consensus. You need data to successfully communicate where our kids are. And we feel like by extending it out 60 days instead of 45 days, 60 days gives us a little more data, especially when you get into the 2nd trimester. 2nd trimester, you really have a lot of data, and 3rd, to finish out the year. So that was why. It's not because we wanted to screw with people and say, hey, we're going to 3, let's just throw one more thing out to people. It wasn't that at all. There was a reason behind that. We wanted more data in a trimester time frame. So that's why the 1, 2, 3. So under, or next to each standard, like right here, measurement, data, probability, those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 standards in a school year that we have to get to at 2nd grade. And you may see a 2, a 3, really struggled here, a 1, and that's not a bad thing. Again, that's going to communicate, the goal is that's going to communicate where that weakness was and help the teacher and help the parents hone in on getting at maybe those weaker areas. Okay? Let's go to the 2nd page real quick, Toriel. On the page, you will have those for parents that either will see this presentation online or obviously are here or do not see it. They will still see the criteria, the grade or the scoring indicators. They're all right there. The 4, 3, 2, 1, X, not assessed. To the left, again, 2nd grade report card. You have behaviors here. This was a really deep conversation we had with one of the curriculum consultants at the IU13 over the last couple days. And we've seen this in other districts where we don't, and teachers heard this a lot recently, we want to do our best to start taking behavior out of those learning standards, right? We don't want behavior, because behavior could skew where a child really is in regards to one of those standards on that last page. And we don't want that, right? That does no good for us. But now at least, because K1, 2, they're still little kids, they're really little kids, behavior is important. And those are conversations we're going to have if maybe we need to do that for 3, 4, and 5. But K1 and 2, I think I would think most would agree that reporting out behaviors is a valuable piece of information. But we don't want that behavior. Just because a kid can't sit in their seat, should they be penalized on an assessment? And I'm not saying we do that, but this helps make it a little more clear cut. Like we can kind of separate the craziness that maybe some kids go through, and that's normal, especially in these ages. But we don't want that to affect the communication of where that child falls on a standard. Okay? So you're going to see behavior if you're a K1, 2 parent, at least in year 1. And then there'll be comment sections here, just like any report card. I think the other thing on here that you're not seeing, well, not I think, I know. What you're not seeing is just like the little things like the days absent, the attendance, that kind of stuff. That's just, I think, good for parents to see. You know, parents that are shooting for those perfect attendance, and also parents that like have to send letters to because their kids miss a lot of school. So that's always good for people to see. We can come back to that because I know this is kind of what people want to see and want to talk about. So we can, when I get through this, we can go back to any of these slides you want to go back to. But you know, if there's no dire questions on this, Toriel, you want to go to the next one? Just some communication. Again, I try to be very transparent. There was nothing secret about this. This goes back, again, it started last fall. This wasn't put together in the summer. This wasn't put together last week. This started last fall. These conversations started last summer, actually, before the fall started with administration. We sent a letter home at the end of May or June. We're here. This is the first, and I hope there's going to be more of these, and we get more people involved in this. My goal is to kind of keep pushing this out there and make sure people are aware, because I think in any district, that's where things go south really quick, when people get hit with something and they didn't know about it. And if we've all learned anything about anything with school, people want to be communicated with. So that's very important to me. And I know it's important to our teachers, and we want to make sure we're communicating this stuff. The link to the website is there. We can click on that in a second, but I just had this on here, September trainings, that we just wrapped up 2 days of mindset training. It wasn't power school training. This was more of that the mind shift of standards-based grading versus traditional. And I will say, as a year one district, we still have some of that traditional, right? I don't know what some of you guys, your background is with other districts, but there are districts, and the example we heard from the IU was School District of Lancaster. They're full standards-based. And by whatever it was, year 3, year 4, they did away with all traditional not traditional assessments, but traditional scoring. So everything was scored on a 4, 3, 2, 1. But that came with a lot of time and a lot of resources. That came with grade level consistent rubrics that teachers were able to, across grade levels and across buildings. And I think, what did they say, 13 buildings in Lancaster School District? So, it makes us looks easy in 4 buildings. But I will say this, and I've said this to the teachers, if we go full standards based, I'm talking full, no more power school, 15 out of 20s on spelling quizzes or math assessments. Everything's 4, 3, 2, 1. Everything you see is 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a lot of work, and that's, to me. And again, I'm not speaking. Please don't think I'm here speaking for the entire admin. For some reason, I ended up with this, and I've embraced it, and it's kind of exciting because I like this, and I've learned a lot. But I don't know what the future holds. I'm going to make that very clear. That's going to happen with constant communication and collaboration with teachers and admin. And I know we have the support of the IU. Because I think if I would stand up here today, and maybe you're ready to throw some food at me or yell at me and scream at me, and that's fine, but if I would stand here and say everything's 4, 3, 2, 1, and you don't know what the rubric is, and you're not going to know what the rubric is, but you're going to see a 4, 3, 2, 1 or an X when you get the report card, I would have a hard time swallowing that as a parent. I would have a hard time selling that as a principal. So my point is, this is year one. You still have traditional with the way we assess, with the way, and let me say this too, because it's not on here, and this is probably really important. I wanted to say this. In grades 3, 4, and 5, you're still seeing an overall grade. And that's going to be a little tricky. It's going to be, I think, easy because we're used to that, right? So, Toriel, do me a favor. Go back to...